Right. But overall, having a good time. So life is good.
Good.
Life is good.
Good.
I did, however, hear that I missed a great New Japan pay-per-view.
You missed a great main event. The pay-per-view itself was good. The last two matches were really good. The main event was match of the year caliber. I haven't seen. There's a match that I need to watch actually, that I was actually planning on watching today that I haven't gotten around to, from New Japan from last week that I heard was tremendous. And actually, it was Masato Tanaka and Tomohiro Ishii. So I have to compare that. But of the matches I've seen this year, I think the Tanahashi match with Carl Anderson is probably the best match I've seen this year. Right at the same caliber as the Tanahashi Okada match from the Tokyo Dome. It's really hard for me to say one was better than the other because they were actually very similar matches, and I don't know. Maybe it's really a hard one to call, but they're both roughly at the same level. It was just a super main event. It's kind of a cold crowd, and to watch them just get that crowd going, and tell the story of Anderson, who nobody believed had a chance to win, and really did have no chance to win, but actually able to convince people on some of those near falls that he was probably going to win. And they did a good video feature on Anderson before the main event started, talking about him, starting out and everything. And it was a very well done. That was very well done. Show was good though. I mean, like every single match. The opening match I thought was so, and there was one match with Togi Makabe and Yujiro Takahashi that was okay. Everything else was good, but the crowd hurt a lot of the matches. The crowd really hurt the Prince Devitt and Ryusuke Taguchi match, which was a really good match anyway, but I think it probably would have been like over 4 stars if there was a better crowd. But even with the crowd, every match was enjoyable.
Tanahashi had requested to work a match with Anderson. Is that?
Basically, he did. Yeah, he wanted it on a big show, so he got it, and Anderson really came through. I mean, it was like a
just a guy that he thought he could have a great match with, or friends with him, or
both,
what was the story?
Both. I think that there was a feeling that there's the fear that Anderson would go to WWE, and I think that because he didn't go to WWE, and he I don't know if he signed a new contract, but he didn't go, and the offers are there, that that he wanted to reward him, and they did have the match in the G1 from August where Anderson beat him, so he did need his win back, so to speak. It made sense, but so it was a combination of things. That was one of them. But I think the biggest story coming out of this, because the results of the matches really were very predictable. The only one that I think some people might have been surprised with Minoru Suzuki beating Kazuchika Okada clean in the middle with a Gotch pile driver. But really, I wasn't surprised at all with that result because it kind of made sense with just the way that they're going and everything. But the big surprise was that they did, and I don't know the exact number right now, but it's presumably going to be topping 91,000 buys on pay-per-view, which, like the last one, which did over 100, that's like their WrestleMania. So the idea that you come back, 5 weeks later with a show headlined by Tanahashi and Carl Anderson, you'd figure you'd be back at the, hopefully at the 50 range that you were doing before, maybe a little less because, really when it comes to, a world championship match and everything, Carl Anderson as a contender is a lot, what's the word? It's not as big a deal as Minoru Suzuki would be, who was the October headliner. I guess he would be about the same as Yujiro, who was November headliner. But even so, you're coming off the big show. You figure you're going to have a big drop. If you went to 50, you would think, okay, we're back at the normal number. But apparently the normal number now, after the big success of the January 4th show, is those people came back, and the normal number now is 90 instead of 50. And that's a hell of a jump for, going from November, December. I think they had a show in December as well. So going from a December show to February, where your base or your normal or your average goes from 50 to 90, that's a huge story. They're now, like, legitimately, they're now in the range of WWE when it comes to in their home country. and they're doing it on the internet, not on TV, which I think is a big disadvantage, number one. And then and we're not including the regular pay-per-views. You know, and they're getting about 20,000 of those too. So really, if you include both, they're actually ahead on B shows of WWE, or the same in a country of 1/3 population.
Now, can we safely say that these are pretty close to accurate numbers, or are these
the number? I mean, I got the number when the show was over, and it's the exact number, which was it was a little under 90,000, but the presumption would be that they were going to top 91,000 with the late buys. But they were right. I believe they were right at 89,000, just under 89,000 when the show ended. So that's live buys. So if you include late buys, they're 91,000 was where they expected to end up.
Well, that's pretty impressive, given that the pay-per-view business is apparently in deep decline.
Who said that?
TNA.
Well, if you don't promote your shows and you don't book smart, yeah, probably. But
now,
TNA's problem is that they don't promote their shows, and they make it clear that the pay-per-views are secondary to the TV, and if you did that, yeah, your pay-per-view business, it makes no sense to have pay-per-view business if your pay-per-view business can be secondary to television.
Now, Dixie did have some announcements on Bellator, of all things, this past Thursday night. Jeff Hardy signed a new 2-year deal through February of 2015, and also announced some new dates for Impact going on the road. It looks like, with the exception of the taped pay-per-views, they've got, I think, 3 tapings coming up. With the exception of those, it looks like this is it for the Impact Zone for the foreseeable future.
This is it for the Impact Zone at the end of March. They've got 3 shows between that will all be taped shows, and some days they're going to be doubling up, but they're going to be doing all of their pay-per-views with the exception of the 2 live shows left, right? Or is it 3? They've got Slammiversary in June and Bound for Glory and Lockdown on March 10th, and then they got Slammiversary and Bound for Glory. With the exception of those 3 shows, Lockdown will actually be done on March 10th. So the point is that as of the end of March, they will have 2 pay-per-views the rest of the year, because everything else will already be taped except for those 2 shows, because they're taping through the December pay-per-view at the late March tapings.
Now, I want to go back to the New Japan show very quickly, because last time we reviewed one of the shows here, we were talking about all of the turmoil backstage and everything that went down with, actually it was Kazushi Sakuraba, the Outsiders angle, which appeared to be over as of the last show. And now here we are, about a month later, and appears to have been a 180. So what happened?
I guess that Kadami got his way after all. And they're bringing in, my impressions are bringing in Kazunari Murakami, who was who had worked for New Japan years ago, who gained his first fame as a martial arts fighter for a fight with Bart Bale and Maurice Smith, back before Maurice Smith was even ever in UFC, back in the old EFC promotion. That Murakami is probably going to join with Shibata and Sakuraba in the outside shooters group, which is what New Japan didn't want and what Kadami did. So anyway, that it looks like that he's getting his way.
So is he unresigned?
He's still resigned. I mean, he's still what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, he resigned his post, but he's still the owner. I mean, so he resigned his post with the company, but when you're the owner, you still have a lot of, whether you say you have influence or not, you have influence.
Now, did you hear anything about? Did you hear anything from the wrestlers' side? I mean, obviously they were unhappy with how everything was going, but did sort of a realization hit them that, wow, these matches worked big, these guys are over, this storyline is working, it's obviously not killing the company?
I don't know. I really don't know anything new other than what I heard after the Tokyo Dome show. And at that point, Shibata was pretty much not even expected to be back, and he was already doing he already did that Noah show just a couple of weeks ago. But he was back, and they're going with Shibata and Hiroki Goto on a big show, I would guess on the April 7th show at Sumo Hall, although that hasn't been announced. But on this show, when they did the tag match, it was Sakuraba and Shibata beating Wataru Inoue and Goto. and then afterwards they had the Shibata Goto face-off. So that it's pretty clear that they're going there, and Sakuraga's already Sakuraga's booked on the next pay-per-view as well. So they're going to do, and obviously if Murakami's involved, they're obviously continuing this thing. That match when it came on, it still had, in comparison to everything else on the show, it had a lot of heat. It didn't, it had some heat in comparison to a normal show. This was, like I said, it was a cold crowd, which is funny because it was a sellout and they turned 1,000 people away. So it's not like, it's an empty building or anything. They had a full house of people who wanted to be there. And it wasn't a papered full house. It was a real full house. But for whatever reason, I don't know, I've been in that building before. And, of course, when I was in that building before, it was almost 30 years ago. But it wasn't quite that long ago. It was 1987. It was the year that Brody walked out. No, before that, because Brody walked out. 87, I saw Brody Brody was already back in All Japan. So it would probably be 86, I'm thinking, 85, maybe 85. So it's almost 30 years. But anyway, I was in that building, and I don't remember if it had heat. I was there in December, so if it didn't have heat, it had been freezing, and I don't remember freezing in that building. So sometimes if you go into some of those old Japanese buildings, they don't have heat, and when it's the winter, it's cold as shit, and people just, they're bundled up, and they're not clapping, and they're not cheering. They like the show, and it's also hard to work in that kind of freezing weather, too, because, those chops and stuff, hurt a lot more when it's freezing outside. But, so, I was thinking maybe, they didn't really have good crowd shots, everyone's bundled up, and that's why they're not making noise. But I remember being in that building, like I said, in December when it was freezing out, and I don't remember being cold in that building, and I do remember the crowd was hot as shit when I was in that building, the last time I was in that building. So that's not an excuse. I don't know what it was. It took a lot to get them going. But they did get going in the main event. I think that's one of the reasons why people are so impressed with the main event, because they by the end of the main event, I don't care what building you would say, that was great heat, and it was a beautiful match. Tanahashi's just at a different level from everybody. He's just, people are going to look back, 5 years, 10 years back. They're going to look back at this run by Tanahashi, and it's going to be like one of those things, like a legendary run as a champion. Because, this is it's like Ric Flair in 89. It's like every month, it's just, I can't remember anyone. He's better than Shawn ever was. He's better than Steamboat ever was. This guy's really got something.